Raka's departure. His show on Friday was a trip back in time. So we thought, let's do something to bring the community together, to show our appreciation to the community that created all these nice memories that we had with Raka. So today we're doing an Ask Me Anything, and ask Mark and Nikos anything. So post your questions in the chat or on Facebook on the actual link. We will give priority to super chat questions, but we will try to cover all the questions until we run out of time. So why am I listening? Oh yes, because I have myself on YouTube. Okay, sorry for the echo. Okay, let's start with the first question. Thank you very much, Nathan. So Nathan has a question about Mark, and it has to do with Hollywood. And he's wondering how the Alec Baldwin incident happened with the gun. So he asks, are actors instructed to always check a gun barrel on set? Could an actor tell the difference between a bullet and a blank? And actually, I would add, do you even have real guns on set?
Sure. Some of the guns in the past, they would use guns, actual guns. Some of them converted to shoot blanks. Some of them were capable of shooting real bullets. You can tell the difference between a blank and a real gun, a real bullet rather. A real bullet has a bullet in it, and the blank has a casing that's crimped shut, and the casing contains like a little bit of filler, that a little bit of filament that could spit out at somebody, which is why when you're pointing the gun at somebody in film, you don't actually point it at them so that the filament doesn't hit them. That was one of the big mistakes that they made with Brandon Lee, when there was something caught inside the barrel, and when he fired it, when somebody fired it at him, it actually hit him with a projectile that killed him. So ever since that, we don't point guns directly at people, just in case filament comes out and could injure somebody. But there's a very clear difference between a regular bullet and a blank cartridge. And also, if for example, when you're using a revolver or a Colt, revolver in the way that Alec Baldwin had, which is a period piece, you can see inside the cylinder, you can see each bullet in there. And so it's important to have what they call dum-dum bullets or fake bullets in there, so that it looks like an actual live round is in there when it isn't. Now, anytime that's the case, an armorer opens the cylinder, drops out the bullets, and shows you that they are dum-dum bullets. And how do you do that? You shake them, and a bad round, a dummy round, will rattle. And or they show you the firing pin, the depressed firing pin at the back of the cartridge, which shows that it can't be fired, even if the hammer were actually to hit the firing pin, it wouldn't go off. Now, this is primarily the responsibility of the armorer and the prop person, who has to clear the weapon with the actor and clear the weapon with everybody who that weapon is going to be pointed at. But it's also, I think, a responsibility of the actor as well, to make sure the weapon is cleared in front of him, to make sure the weapon is cleared in front of all those who will be working with the weapon, because he's part of the chain of responsibility of that weapon. So if at any part it breaks down, primary responsibility goes with the people who are supposed to be, in charge of it, but you're in charge of it when you have it in your hands, so it's your responsibility too. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard Alec was a producer on the piece, which makes him extra responsible, if that's the truth, for the safety and well-being of all of the crew and cast on the show.
What a crazy story, and what a tragedy. Okay, so let's go to more questions. Bonnie, for both, do you see any increase in awareness among the non-objective people you deal with of the idea that the left and the right are two sides of the same authoritarian coin? So, two parts. Random people around me, no, it's actually worse. They go either to the one side or to the other because of how much they are disgusted with the other side. And particularly, I see them following the party line on topics that they shouldn't, such as the vaccines, on topics that have to do with their own life and their own health. Now, I have a confirmation bias because usually I'm invited by Students for Liberty or similar organizations who have as their line that left and right are two sides of the same coin. So in the political circles I'm around, yes, there is such a consensus, but I don't know if this is representative. Mark actually knows more people, is in more circles, so he could give a better answer to that.
I think people who are thoughtful are starting to become pretty disenchanted by the left and the right, and they're starting to see the fact that there are two tribes who are more interested in beating each other than acting for the interests of the people. Of course, we have very different ideas about what that means, but there is a growing crowd of folks starting to see that the similarities are overwhelming the differences, and the desire to beat the other tribe is becoming more important than doing something productive and valuable. So I'd like to take advantage of that wherever I can. I also see that, harder lines are starting to be drawn between the parties, and that popularity on social media especially is often determined by which tribe you're in and how loud you scream. And if you happen to be outside of the tribe trying to point out that the emperor has no clothes, your following can dissipate a little bit more, while their following is increasing exponentially. I mean, I point out a guy like Zuby, who's a conservative. I mean, he's rational in a lot of ways, but totally unhinged in others. But because he's a conservative, towing basically the conservative party line, his following has gone from like 400,000 to probably almost 1 million within just a few months. So that shows the other side of the coin. The fact that people are so that the hardliners, the people who are really interested in politics, are solidifying into the tribes, and the people who are outside of that are starting to discover that, it's not, the answers aren't going to be had from those two groups of folks.
Okay, so Bonnie, there's one more question, but I said we would give priority to super chats, but we will read yours at the end. Okay, thanks to the super chatters. Jonathan says, who is the old girlfriend you guys think most about and why? Well, I used to, but now I'm happy with a current girlfriend, so I don't think about the old girlfriend anymore. So, Mark, what about you?
I don't think about old girlfriends.
But let me tell you this. If you do think a lot about old girlfriends, it can become, how it's called, this LARPing. So it means something is wrong, something is missing. So particularly if you're in a relationship, because I've been there, and you think of old girlfriends, major red flag about the current relationship. So check your premises.
They're old girlfriends for a reason.
Through that. Thank you very much, Marilyn. We really appreciate your support. So Jonathan, thanks for another super chat. Thanks. So he says, I'm a great public speaker. I appreciate it. Mark, do you enjoy public speaking as well?
Yes. It's an acquired skill though. So I'm trying to do it more and more so that I get better at it. When I see people like Nikos and Iran, of course, I see that I have a long, long, long ways to go. So they inspire me to do better.
Good. So speaking about public speaking, this weekend, it's the birthday of Ayn Rand Center UK. And as part of the celebration, I'm in Edinburgh and I'm giving a public speaking workshop only for members of ARCUK, which is going to be professional, and I'm putting a lot of effort in it. So it's not going to be 10 minutes. Oh, don't get stressed, have 3 points. It's going to be, you're up for a treat. Marilyn asks, thank you very much, Marilyn. What do you think about the future of Iran? I think the future of Iran is bleak if you are a theocrat and if you are a part of the regime. I cannot see how the regime can. I cannot see how any dictatorship can survive in the long term. So the tendency is for dictatorships to fall. We've seen it with the Eastern Bloc. Later, most of the dictatorships either fall or they change significantly, as it happens with Vietnam. Whereas Iran seems to be very much stuck in its old ways, and I don't see it lasting for long. We live in a world where communication is easier, where it's difficult for a regime to bullshit its people. So I'm optimist that Iran is going to change relatively soon. Mark.
I mean, I'd like to think that that's the case. I'm a big fan of freedom movements everywhere, and the freedom movement in Iran is as great as any movement I've ever seen. I mean, I have to add a caveat to that. I think that the intellectual tenor of the right seems to be moving in support of those types of regimes and in support of regimes that support those regimes. So, the Alexander Dugins of the world that are into that Russian Iranian axis, and some of the traditionalist conservatives out there that really do think that theocracy is a valid form of social governance, are becoming a wider and wider group of folks within the right. So as far as I'm concerned, that dims the possibility of a liberated and liberal movement coming out of Iran, and can make the mullah's half-life, which should have been over in 1979, to be honest with you, it makes it that much longer. Although I agree with your premise that, totalitarian governments can never last, dictatorships can never last, in the same way that centralized anything can't really last. It's anti-human and crushes thought, free thought, the very things that enable us to live and innovate and thrive. They are anti those things. So yeah, it'll have a limited life, but who knows when it's going to happen.
Of course, someone could bring up the case of China. I think China is a very special case. It went through decades of switching its route, but that's for another discussion. Very interesting question by Jonathan. Thanks for more dollars coming on way. Thoughts on Anne Hathaway? So, Mark, you start and then I'll tell you my position.
Well, wait, what has Anne Hathaway done?
I assume generally as a woman. Actually, let me tell you my take, so maybe it gives you food for thought. I think she's too pretty to play Dagny. I'm mentioning because many objectivists say she would be an excellent Dagny. She has expressive eyes, but I think overall she's way too... So Dagny is not obviously beautiful. Dagny is not someone where the average man at work sees at her and has like romantic or sexual thoughts. So, but as an actress overall, I like most of her movies that I've watched. So again, very expressive, but not my ideal Dagny, if this is what you are referring to, Jonathan.
Okay, good. So she hasn't done anything that puts her afoul of objectivity.
I don't think so.
I think the opposite. I think she's fantastic. Of course, she's a great actress. She does have those big, expressive Ayn Rand-esque eyes that take in the world and show everything. And she's dynamic and charismatic, sexy, but has innocence to her. I mean, I think she could be a great Dagny, a very dynamic Dagny. And I disagree. I think you should look at a Dagny and want to have sex with her. You should. Just like you should look at Rourke and want the same thing if you're a woman, or Hank Reardon, or any of those people.
Yes, but notice that only Hank... Okay, now that I think about it, at least 4 men in the novel look at her and they like her. So, okay, maybe I was wrong. Yeah, she is...
Goes through all of those guys. Goes through all of those guys. So, yeah, she's got to have it. She's got to bring that special something, that X factor to the piece. She's a rock star, man. That's one of the things I love about Jackson Jennifer's version of Atlas Shrugged is the introduction to Dagny. Give me chills. If you could see this, I have a little chills here. It's a rock star entrance appropriate to one of the main heroes of that story. And the Daily Wire, I'll have to say, will never ever achieve that.
I was watching your episode on the strike, and I'm wondering how I can get a hold of the script, because I can't wait to read it. So this is a question which is not a super chat, but I appreciate it so much. I'm going to read it before other super chats. From Mari Ben's nickname. During the last couple of hours of the day, I want to keep working, but often don't have the mental energy for anything more involved than Sudoku. How do I increase my mental stamina? First of all, you don't have to work at the last 2 hours of the day, but if you definitely have to, it's not about stamina, so forget caffeine and stuff. The thing that works always for me is Pomodoro. So tell yourself, I'm going to do 2 Pomodoros. So before you know it, you've done 1 hour of work. That's the best solution. It's difficult to say, oh, I'm going to sit and work. But if you just tell yourself, I'm going to do 2 Pomodoros, let's say from 9 until 10 every night, you can do some good work. It cannot be your most productive work. So usually at that time of the day, I either do reading or I do marking, hopefully ARU students won't see this and think that I'm doing marking just before I sleep.
I have a stupid question. What's a Pomodoro?
Okay, the Pomodoro method, it comes from Pomodoro spaghetti, which is an Italian plate. In order to cook a spaghetti, you need apparently 25 minutes, the spaghetti Pomodoro. So the Pomodoro method is you work for 25 minutes and then you have a 5-minute break. So if you say I'm going to do 2 Pomodoros, you work 25 minutes. Then you have a 5 minutes break. Then you work another 25 minutes. And you can do as many Pomodoros as you want. So to our friend, I would say this is the one idea. The other idea that could work on the short term, but I think in the long term is not good, is to work with music. Because if you have to put yourself, if you need music to put yourself down to work, this means you need some extra dopamine. And some people that I trust, and like Andrew Haberman says, this is not a good way. Don't make yourself work because of a dopamine trigger. This is why I've stopped working out with music, or I do it very rarely. Make sure you find a way which doesn't include extra stimulation, because then next time you have to work, you'll have to take even more extra stimulation.
Well, I got to tell you, I love music when I'm working out. Of course, I work out at a place called Orange Theory now that uses music. Music is very important to me when working out, especially when I was really in super shape. When I had 7% body fat, it was because I was doing cardio, hard interval training cardio to music. And I would time the hardest stuff to the fastest, most intense music. And the music let me forget about the pain I was experiencing in my body and let me push past it and go into higher and higher thresholds. I don't recommend that for any other kind of work, but I think music is great. It spiritually fills you up. It makes you bigger than you are, and it pushes you, it enables you to go further than you could, at least physically. I think I love listening to rap when I'm boxing. You know, that it gets you into that animalistic mode, gets you into your body. But I love that Pomodoro method. What I do is I set my timer and I work for an hour and a half straight through. Then I take a break for a little while. Then I work for another hour and a half straight through. And I do that 4 or 5 times a day when I'm writing productively. And I find that to be a good method.
If you manage to put yourself to work for 1.5 hours straight, you don't need any productivity tip. You're doing great. For most people, including myself, that's too long. It's difficult. Okay. Our friend Catherine, thank you very much for your contribution. Can you clarify libertarian position on crime, legal system, and force? So there are 55 different libertarian positions on that. Many libertarians think that you could have competing providers of force, and I used to be one of them. Let me tell you what changed my mind. Now I think you should have one provider of who has a monopoly of force. This doesn't mean that you cannot have bodyguards. This cannot mean you cannot have private investigators. But if you have competing legal system, the problem I see is that what if the most popular one ends up not defending individual rights? And I had such a discussion with an anarcho-capitalist. I told him, what happens if one of the competing systems is Sharia law, and then Sharia law takes over? And he said, tough luck. And he's right. Under such a system, there is no guarantee. Of course, in no system there's no guarantee that Sharia law or proletarian justice or whatever is going to take over. But if you have a rock-solid constitution that gives the monopoly of force to an institution that supposedly should recognize individual rights, then I would feel slightly safer. So one rule for the monopoly of force, but you can have, again, bodyguards, private investigators. The only thing they cannot do is enforce their own law. But otherwise, I see a lot of space for private security and, quote, private police. Not actually police, though, that can use lethal force and stuff. But, for example, security companies that you can tell that they tell you, if we don't find your stolen car, you get your money back. So something like that, I could see it. Again, this is my position. This is not the objectivist position. I'm sure many objectivists would disagree with that part.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be saying necessarily the strict objectivist line on this. I'll say first off that it doesn't matter what form a government takes as long as it's protecting individual rights. The form is irrelevant. Because most governments don't protect individual rights, we've developed a system called a representative republic, which is intended to separate out power and deconcentrate it in such a way that it's harder and harder and harder for individual interest groups to take over and do bad things to other people. Of course, we see where that goes when a constitution isn't built necessarily explicitly on the defense of individual rights. It can go wherever it goes. That said, I think I'm not going to discuss the 51 billion different ways that libertarians look at the world. I would just say that they think government is bad, that it is not even a necessary evil, but an evil, because it is predicated on the initiation of force. And they base this on the fact that it has to tax people in order to maintain itself. And they don't like any imposition on their own wills. They hold their will as the primary, not reason. That's why they don't understand rights and the government's relationship to rights, since they hold will as their primary value, and any interference with that as the introduction of compulsion into their lives. So I would say that any person that thinks government is evil qua government doesn't know what government is. They're as bad as the people that think guns are evil because they're guns. No, they're just a thing that are dependent upon the values of the people who are using them and occupying the institutions. So a government occupied by people who believe that they should promote and defend individual rights is a government that would harm no one. It's a government where the gun is pointed at the bad guys who are still subject to the right to the submission of their problems or their crime to a rule of law and due process. I would also say that the libertarians have a sense of this concept of natural right that is wrong in my view, and it's almost a sense that right is actually a biological aspect of your being. It's not made up. It's not something that human beings have made up out of understanding the needs and requirements for human life. It's something that comes and goes with you wherever you are, inherent to your being. And so that's one of the reasons they can say some of the crazy things they say. One person, for example, I argued with, didn't believe that a person who was convicted of murder could be put in jail because that would be violating.
Oh yeah, I've heard this from prominent libertarians.
Yeah, can't put a murderer in jail. I mean, the murderer can be killed by various people in the community because they don't want him in there, but he can't be put in jail because you would be violating his rights. Now, that's an interpretation of rights that I think is insane. It's even perverse. It's a perverse twist on Locke's natural rights theory, in my view. And or maybe it's the natural consequence of it. I don't know. But that's my thumbnail sketch of.
And keep in mind, people, this is a topic I'm by no means not even an expert, not even a hobbyist. It's not one of my main interests. Okay, next question. We have many, so thank you very much. So Kirk asks, what are our thoughts on Space Jam? So I assume you mean the original Space Jam. So it's been ages since I've watched it. I remember liking it. I found it a bit cocky. Like Jordan gathers the team. Each one wants to prove to the other that they are good, that particularly when they lose their skills. So I remember Larry Johnson, that tall guy who had the accident, and I hope he's doing better. Sean Bradley, I think. Was Barkley there as well? Pat Ewing. Anyway, so they were some of the basketball heroes of my youth. So Space Jam, the original one, very good memories. Although I'm a huge LeBron fanboy, I wouldn't watch the new one because I can't imagine there's any way I would like it.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Okay. But Kirk, I'm curious why you're asking and whether you have a hot take on it. But so you can put it in the comments without a super chat. I'm curious. Jonathan says, if I can say the phrase, and of course I can, a skunk sat on a stump and thunk, the stump stunk, but the stump thunk, the skunk stunk. In Greece, we have way more difficult phrases. What? Because they're supposed to be difficult. Okay, Jonathan has some interesting questions today. What would you talk to Miss Rand about if you could meet her today? I've never thought about that, what I would discuss with her. I would have thought whether she would like me. I think she would like me. I would feel a lot of awe towards her. But if I would talk to her, it would definitely be on the novels. So I have many questions for the novels. So I would talk to her about that. I would ask, why is it that so many times the worker has had all these discussions with Eddie Wheelers, but he never tried to take him to Atlantis? And I have some other questions, mostly related to Dagny and her love life, and also some questions from the Fountainhead. So it would be questions about the books. By the way, producer, this is an excellent daily objective topic. 5 questions we would ask Ayn Rand, so we can think about it and discuss it in a future occasion. Mark, have you thought about what would you do if you met Ayn Rand? What would you chat about?
I have not thought about it, but I don't imagine, the first thing that came to my mind, I don't imagine she'd be too happy about, because I hate that, not Dagny, Dominique. I hate Dominique. And since she is a hero in the story, I was wondering if there was possibly a way to make her more sympathetic.
Okay, that's interesting, because she says that she's Dominique in a bad way. Okay, this has to be a daily objective on its own. What discussion would have with Ayn Rand? Excellent question, Jonathan. Luis, thank you very much. Mark, what have you learned writing your reality check videos? 10 brilliant videos so far. Congrats. And by the way, people, let's do more to spread the word with these videos. These are excellent videos. They should have thousands and thousands of views. So in these videos, Mark is trying within 5 minutes to give a very concise philosophical take on a topic, but he does it in a nice and engaging way. But actually, you should talk about that. So what have you learned from writing these videos?
That Shakespeare is right. Brevity is the soul of wit, and it's and that Rand is right. Economy of concepts is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. Right? I mean, to take a concept like rights or liberty, tolerance, or the social contract, the 2 things I'm writing right now, and compress them into between 3 and 5 minutes of is an extremely difficult thing to do. I think it was Mark Twain who once said he was sorry for writing such a long letter. He didn't have time to write a short one, because it takes a long time to compress your thoughts into the most economical form that you can, and then to present that to people. I think objectivists do that better than anybody out there in the world. That's why I wish they had more play, and I wish they were more accepted instead of being on the fringes, because they articulate, as Rand did in the 60s and the 70s, was the lone voice for articulating really controversial positions very, very well. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, remember when Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged, there are 6 pages of discarded material for every page that made it into that book. So just think on that for a while.
I would pay a lot of money for a 10,000 book that includes the cut pages. Okay, so the same person, Luis, thanks again, asks me what I'm mostly looking forward about the conference in Athens. So 17th of April, we have the Ayn Rand conference, the conference of the Ayn Rand Institute in Europe. It's taking place in Athens. So I have a very unhealthy relationship to big events. Instead of expecting them with like I can't wait, I'm always expecting them with a malevolent universe premise of stress, of let's make sure nothing goes horribly wrong, although I'm not the organizer. So unfortunately, with all the big events, my mind is mostly make sure the weather is going to be okay when it comes to Athens. I hope there's not going to be Greek elections on that day, because then Athens is going to be a bit weird. Make sure that I'm okay with my talk. So I'm focusing on these things. So on the top of my head, mostly that the people will get the good experience of Athens, the good weather, the food. So I love the city so much. So I would like everyone who comes to see the city through my eyes, to see what I like in the city and to see what made me actually return to Greece, although it's a country with so many problems. Actually, my talk is on Greece and anti-Americanism. But yeah, the food is going to be great. The weather is going to be great. So it should be a very good experience. And what I'm looking forward, people to share this experience. Daniel, thank you very much. This is so moving to me. Daniel says that my book on tribalism was his gateway into objectivism, and he thanks me. Thank you so much. He asks, have you gained any new insights into tribalistic, collectivistic circles such as the manosphere? Yes, I think they're way worse than I thought when I was writing the book. When I was writing the book, these groups were just weird in terms of their views, but I didn't realize that the way they arrived to these views was so flawed. I thought they're tribalistic, they hate feminists, that's why they have these views. Now that I see them all going full on conspiracy theories, going full on a completely stupid way of thinking, I think that they are irredeemable. They are beyond redemption. They're hopeless. Is there still good advice in the quote manosphere in some books and stuff? Yes, there is. But you need to have the way of thinking to take this away from the overall context of crazy thinking. Mark, do you have any experience with the manosphere?
The manosphere. Well, no, what my experiences are would tend to reflect yours as well. And this sort of just reminded me of the Iran question earlier. One of the reasons I have a little hope for that freedom movement is because I see so little support for it and so much insanity on either side that I feel, as you do, that, you know, a certain kind of hopelessly lost aspect to, you know, that world.
But thank you, Daniel. This means so much what you said. So Luis, thanks so much for another contribution and another super chat. So Luis asks, what do you think is the most important of Ayn Rand's articles, essays in 2023? This catches me a bit off guard. I haven't thought of it. I will tell you this. The article I'm using mostly is Conservatism and Obituary, because this year I'm mostly talking about the right and how hopeless they are. The right is the one group I had the blind spot for. I was cutting them too much slack. So for me, this is the essay that I'm spending most time revisiting. This doesn't mean that it's the most important essay, but that's the one I mostly go back to this year. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, that catches me off guard too. I'd have to look back on some of her stuff and see what is the most relevant. I think what's astounding about her as a philosopher and thinker is that pretty much everything she writes is more relevant today than it was at the time that she was writing it. When you think the time she was writing it was in the 60s, you know, in the 60s when some of these ideas were sort of germinating, they were being born in the university, and she was able to see where they were going to go, you know, 60 years before their time. That's why somebody like her can I think probably wear the moniker of prophet, because she was able to integrate ideas so well that she could see the logical conclusions of them before anybody else could. And it's really hard to pick out what single essay is more relevant today than any other, because all of them really are. And just piggyback on what you said, I mean, I used to have a soft spot for the right as well, because they mouthed the right words. You know, the words they mouthed, sort of individualism and freedom and smaller government and letting people live and let live, but that's not really what they're about. And Rand's ideas and consistent application of objectivist principles has helped me to see that. So
Luis asks, first of all, thanks so much. We'll try to read all super chats. So I really appreciate this, how much you participate. And producer, let's try to break the video then in how it's called, the parts where people can go straight to the questions that are of interest to them. So Luis asks, what are we reading at the moment? So Luis, at the moment I'm reading for the whole year Les Miserables, because I'm following Lisa Van Dam's Read With Me thing. So I'm reading one chapter per day. I'm a couple of chapters behind, but I'm trying to keep this. I'm reading a book which is related to my Ocon talk. It is a book about the terrorist Carlos the Jackal, because my talk in the summer is going to be about the anti-Semitism of the left and the hatred of the left to Israel. I'm reading 2 books on anti-Americanism for my talk in Athens, and I'm listening to an audiobook on communication, which is by the author who wrote Write Like Ted. So this author, some years ago, don't remember his name or her name, I think it's a her. She wrote a book about the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs. So I'm listening to the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs, and I'm reading these books that all have to do with my work. So actually, I'm not reading anything for pure enjoyment, although you could say Les Miserables is a bit relaxing. And also, I'm reading a alternative history novel sometimes at night, which is, I think it's called The Guns of the South, where some Nazis go back in time to give some AK-47s to the Confederacy to win, but then they're so bad that even General Lee freaks out. But this book is a bit too slow, and I've been reading it for ages. I'm not very motivated within, but I love alternative history. And if someone has a good alternative history with communism, because I found loads of books where Nazis win, Confederacy win, all sorts of alternative history, except one where Soviet Union wins the Second World War, the Cold War. So if anyone has a good alternative history book with communism, let me know. Mark.
There is one, I think, by Philip Roth. I'm trying to remember the name of it now.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Okay, I'm going to double check it immediately, because if yes.
But it's more fascism than communism. So I'm reading, actually on your recommendation, War for Eternity. I'm halfway through that. The Teitelbaum book about traditionalism and Steve Bannon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I don't agree with everything that this guy is saying, but he certainly is able to connect the intellectual dots behind, I think, the alt-right in a way that should trouble most people, since the alt-right is becoming the biggest phenomenon, I think, on the right, and the most aggressive, and that usually means they're the ones that are going to be, on top at the end of the day. I'm also reading The Decline of American Liberalism, which was that was inspired, I think, by a talk by Ayn Rand ages ago, but I just was reading in the old Objectivist newsletters that she had a review of that book, which was written in the late 60s. It's a good assessment of the birth of liberalism in America and the conservative, quote, backlash that happened pretty much right during the formation of the Confederation of States, and that pushed us into a constitutional republic. It's a pretty good book so far. I'm also reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues by Tom Robbins. Every page there's some piece of beautiful language in there that I almost feel like posting every day on Twitter, because it's so funny and interesting way of putting an observation. That I'm reading for fun. I'm reading a book on Jonathan Edwards, the Calvinist preacher. This was given to me by a guy I worked with on Beverly Hills Cop 4, who is a theologian, and he wanted me to, I don't know why he wanted me to read more about Jonathan Edwards. I remember reading a sermon from Jonathan Edwards as a kid, 9th grade, and in Catholic school, and it terrified the crap out of me. And I shuddered to think what his parishioners must have thought with his way of approaching God and your relationship to God. But it's an interest. I'm not so interested in his life as much as I am in that colonial period in Massachusetts, which I find to be very interesting. And
there's some diversity on what the Daily Objective crew is reading, so I like that.
Yes, and I'm starting The Sheep Look Up, which anybody who has read science fiction, I'm a huge Robert Heinlein fan. That's not Heinlein, but I forget the author's name right now. It's my wife recommended it to me, so I'm looking forward to reading that one. Hopefully, it has some free principles, the principles of freedom in there.
I've had so many objectivists tell me to read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I've read something. I've read it, then I forgot why I stopped it. But anyway, I should probably go back to it after I put aside the 10 other things.
It could be a little too libertarian, but you gotta let yourself get into it a little more and watch the relationship between the AI computer and the rebels develop, because it's
spoiler alert. I'm not there yet.
It's very much in the vein of, I think, the way objectivists look at things, and not so much the way the rest of the world does.
Also, no fiction is too libertarian for me. Some years ago, I read a book by a voluntarist, or where there are some libertarian guerrillas, where there's also a B movie with it. And I remembered, I found it relatively interesting. In the movie, they sell nuclear bombs in the local market, so it's too much libertarian, but I found the book interesting. But I was a newbie in libertarianism back then. Okay, speaking of libertarianism, actually, no, before we get to the question by Catherine. So Jonathan asks, I have no idea what this means. Mark, do a lot of men in Hollywood get lipo? L-I-P-O. I have no idea what lipo is.
Liposuction or lipo, you mean where they get fat removed from their body surgically? I'm assuming that's what that is. I don't know. And if they do, they wouldn't tell me. The guys that I know just work out and stay in shape and eat right, you know, and I don't know of any liposuction action there.
James, it means a lot that you are watching this and also that you are contributing. James Valiant says, this is great. That's all. Thank you so much. So Catherine asks, what is the difference between libertarians and anarchism? So the quick answer, Catherine, would be that all anarchists are libertarians, but not all libertarians are anarchists. So within the libertarian camp, you can find people who believe in limited government. You can find people who consider themselves classical liberals. You can even find people who are basically center-right, but for some reason they call themselves libertarians. You can find people who like Dugin. Such people exist in the libertarian movement. If you want the history of the movement, there's a book, although the guy doesn't really appreciate or portray Rand very well. It's called Radicals for Capitalism. It's by Brian Doherty, who writes on Reason. So this is considered the best historiography of the libertarian movement and all the distinction between anarchists or not anarchists. So the book is Radicals for Capitalism. Again, it's not an endorsement of the content of the book, but it's one of the most ambitious projects to write a history of the libertarian movement. If I remember well, though, it's an expensive book. Okay.
Yeah, I could see why a libertarian wouldn't like Rand. She didn't like them. There's a reason for that. And I would just piggyback on that. I agree with your assessment totally, but I tend to think that the most consistent practitioners of something end up taking over. And you see that in the libertarian movement. Even though the libertarian movement has a quote unquote wide enough tent to incorporate all these disparate philosophies, in the end, the anarchists are in control. The anarchists are the intellectuals that are predominantly leading everybody else. And that's the most consistent, I think, practice of libertarianism there is.
Bonnie, thank you so much for your contribution. And this reminds me, you've asked another question. So Bonnie asks, Rubin said today we are at a fork in the road. Will we go woke or will we go freedom-loving, capitalist-loving, decency and all that stuff? Is this a step forward or is it missing something crucial? The way you put it, woke or freedom-loving, this sounds good. But unfortunately, this is not the main crossroads today. The main crossroads in politics today is woke versus authoritarians of the right. So you will find many people who are anti-woke, who are flirting with national conservatism, who find the inspiration in figures like Dugin or Bannon, who wanted to control, quote, big tech. So I don't think Rubin understands what is the alternative to wokeness.
I think he understands the alternative is capitalism and liberty. He just is investing in the wrong group, because the groups that are aligning themselves today are woke and anti-woke. And in that anti-woke camp are anti-capitalist, anti-individualist, anti-enlightenment, anti-intellectual, pro-religion, pro-mythology, pro-other things that I think are very destructive to not only American culture itself, but to individual epistemological health, you name it. And that's what we're facing today. But he names the proper antagonists, but he's not investing in the right group.
So last question, before we get to the last question, a huge thank you to Walter, a huge thank you to Ryan, and a huge thank you to Brian. These people have no question, but they're just showing their appreciation with some super chat. So thank you so much. This means so much to me that you all have you have all these questions, and it motivates me to work even harder to make sure that every daily objective is worthy of the people that you are. So last question, Jonathan asks, is the term globalist slur code for Jewish? No, because it's used by so many people these days that I don't think it's a slur code for Jewish. Some people, when they say globalist, they mean these people, so maybe they mean Jewish. But I found something interesting. First time I saw that chronologically, first the earliest mention of the term that I have seen with my eyes comes from Dugin. And he used this term around 2006, 2007. I don't remember when he wrote Fourth Political Theory. So those who think that, I mean, there is a legitimate way to use the term. I know good people who have used the term, but more and more it's used by weirdos on the right. So I don't think I'll be using this term anymore because it's too toxic to use.
Yeah, I think globalist is a dog whistle for a leftist, basically. Unfortunately, it sweeps up a lot of good in its path. It's somebody who wants open borders and open trade with other countries, and wants those rules that are between countries to be equal, as opposed to favoring the United States exclusively like a mercantilist power. So it means anti-left, basically, but it sweeps it means also pro-protectionist, pro-nationalist.
And some years ago, I would use the term. These days, I would be considered a globalist because I support Ukraine and because I don't think that the vaccines are making us drop like flies. So go figure. Okay, so a big thank you. Thanks, Marlon, for a last minute super chat. Thanks to all of you. If I didn't answer a question by a member or something, Daniel, let me know, and I will write you back through the producer. So tonight, 9 p.m. UK TV time, Harry Binswager, what young Sheldon Cooper didn't know. So turns out Harry is watching either what's that series with The Big Bang, or the spin-off with, I think it's called Young Sheldon or something like that. So I assume this is what it's about. So you're up for a treat. So Mark, any final words?
No, I really appreciated sitting in on this session with you and answering all those questions. They were very thoughtful. It was fun for me. I hope it was fun for everybody out there.
Excellent. So we do this approximately once every year. So let's hope next year we're all going to be healthy here and the community is going to be even bigger. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the producer. Bye-bye.
Peace.